Welcome to Exo News TV. I'm Michael Salla. A new witness to secret space programs has publicly come forward to give details about how these programs operate in recruiting and treating personnel who are considered to be slaves with no rights. Tony Rodriguez claims that in 1981, when only 9 years old and in 4th grade, he was involuntarily recruited into a 20 and back program as punishment for something he did to one of his classroom peers. He publicly embarrassed the son of a high-level member of the Illuminati, and Tony says that he was soon after abducted by 5 aliens. He was then genetically tested to determine what skills he possessed, which could be used in covert support programs and eventually for the secret space programs themselves when he got older. Tony says that he was first forced to work as a psychic for a drug-running operation out of Peru for 4 years before being recruited as a sex worker in the area of Seattle from age 13. When he turned 16 years old in 1988, he was taken to the moon to be tested for any skills he possessed that would be of most benefit for service in the secret space programs. After briefly serving on Mars as a slave fighter for a mercenary military force protecting corporate bases from indigenous Martians, he says he was taken to Ceres, a planetoid in the asteroid belt, where he worked for 13 years with a German-led freighter crew that was part of the Dark Fleet, which was initially set up by Nazi Germany during World War II. I was first contacted by Tony on August 15, 2015 and have spent more than a year vetting Tony's testimony with the support of 2 other researchers, Morgan Starr and Rob Potter. Our conclusion is that Tony is being truthful, sincere and consistent in describing events he recalls experiencing during a 20 and back secret space program. Tony was publicly identified by Rob Potter on the last day of the Secret Space Program conference held at Mount Shasta from August 26 to 28. I subsequently interviewed Tony for Exo News TV from the Speaker Lodge at the conference on the morning of August 29. In this first episode in a 5-part series, Tony explains the event that led to his involuntary recruitment into a 20 and back program and his first trip to the moon in 1981. Welcome, Tony, to Exo News TV. I thought it would be good if you basically began by giving the audience an idea of how you were recruited into this program. What were the events that basically set you up for serving in this 20 and back program, and maybe describe this kind of encounter you had with the Illuminati child?
Well, I was in the TAG program in grade school. I was 4th grade. It was 1981, and we met every Wednesday in the library, and it was the top 5% of students in the school for academics, and it was advanced learning stuff. Talented and gifted was what it was. I think the program still exists. There was a boy in there who was very smart, and I came early one Wednesday, and he was sitting we met in the library, and he was sitting at the couch with 3 or 4 other girls, and they were all laughing. They were having a good time. You know, we were 9-year-old kids, and so I walked up and I said, "What's going on?" And one of the girls said, "Do it to him, do it to him." And the other girl said, "He can tell what you're thinking. He can read your mind." And I totally didn't believe that at all. And he said, no, I don't want to. And they egged him on and said, "Go ahead, do it to him." So in my mind, I thought, that's impossible, it's no way. So I thought I wanted to get a ruse out of him, and maybe it was like grade school kids trying to dog eat dog thing. So I thought the most insulting thing I could. And in my mind, I looked at him and I thought to myself, "You're the ugliest kid I've ever seen, and none of these girls would ever like you." And he looked at me and he was just, I don't know, insulted. You could tell. He knew it. And I went, wow, I couldn't believe that that I got that response out of him. So he said nothing. I said, "Go ahead, tell him what I thought." And he said nothing, but that was the end of any opportunity to be friends with him. He hated me after that. After a few weeks went on, his father came in and was the judge for the science fair in the cafeteria, and when I walked by them, he said, "Dad, that's that boy that ruined my confidence." And they talked about me for a minute, but I just kept walking. And maybe 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 nights later, it was your standard UFO abduction. I woke up in the middle of the night. We had the old style phone down in the kitchen that rang with the long cord, and it would ring and ring, and you could feel kind of like a buzzing around the house, and there were lights going off outside the house, and the phone ring, and then it stopped. And then the phone rang, and in my mind I was thinking someone's, you know, mom or dad will answer that. But no one got up. It went on for a very long time. And then it stopped, and the lights went out. There were bright lights outside, and they went out. And it was your standard gray alien standing in front of me. And 2 or 3 shorter ones, they were like reptiles, but they had like hoods over them, and they were maybe 3 feet tall. They came in and carried me out to the end of my bed, and I woke up in some sort of laboratory, and they did a check on me. They did like a biopsy or something like that. And they said that they were communicating telepathically with me, and they said they wanted to check my genetics to see if I was compatible with what they wanted to do. And so we waited there 15 minutes or so, and it came back. They said just barely your genetics will work. And then his exact words, you know, or thoughts were, we want to borrow your consciousness, is what he said to me. And I said, okay, what does that mean? What does that entail? You know, what is that going to do? And he said, we're going to take you for 20 years and bring you back. And I said, no, I can't do that. I have a family. There's no way. He said, no, we have time travel, and you're going to be back in just 15 minutes. You know, we're going to get you back home. And in my mind, I thought that I was in a first contact situation. You know, I was a little kid. I was watching Star Trek and stuff, and I thought that, you know, yay, aliens are real. I knew you guys are real. I can't wait to tell everybody about you, that you exist. And I didn't know what I was in for, so I agreed, and they put me down on the table. It was exactly like the Fire in the Sky account, with the rubber going over you, and then the table sucking the rubber tight. And then I couldn't breathe, so then he cut a hole for my mouth to breathe, and then they cut around my right eye, and there was a needle that inserted and went in, and I lost consciousness. I felt like I was being sucked out of my body, and I woke up in a hospital in the desert. Do you want me to tell where that I think that was?
Sure, yeah, tell us.
Well, it was the Inyokern Air Base next to China Lake. I found it on Google Earth, and I recognized from walking there. And we took bus rides from building to building, and it was pretty much the China Lake facility. But it was an old 50s style. This was in the early 80s, and the bed, it looked like an old hospital, like hospital beds, and there were 6 or 7 other kids my age in there. And yes?
Yeah.
And the doctor gave me a standard reflex test, you know, it was a standard checkup, breathe and all that. And then he asked me a few questions. He asked me, do you remember your mom and dad? And I didn't. I had no memory of anything. Do you remember your mom and dad? I said, no. Do you have any brothers or sisters? No. He said, and then he asked me, which was strange, he said, do you believe in God? And I thought about it, and I said, yes. And he said, we'll take care of that. And then they let me go, and I rested. And then I began over the next, I don't know, I lost track of the time, couple months. Your standard MK Ultra program, where they would give us drugs and make us watch subliminal movies. They had satanic messages in there. They had lots of subliminal stuff. We were shocked, and then they stepped up kind of traumatic torture. It's still kind of hard to think about it when I do. It's still very uncomfortable to think about the things they did. The girls in the program were raped, and they were young girls. Toward the end of it, we went through a test, and he brought us in. Each day he'd bring us in after what we went through the day before and asked us questions about it. And it was like an aptitude test. And he said, at the very end of the program, he said, congratulations, I didn't think anybody had it in them in this group. And you guys tested, I believe the word he used was theta. And it was psychic service. And he said, so we wouldn't be killers or some other kind of slaves. So we went into psychic service. And then from there, we took a bus ride over to the China Lake facility and went into one of the buildings. And it seemed to be Air Force personnel. At least that's what I remember of the color of their uniform. And we went into an elevator. There were other people in the elevator that didn't have clearance, and the one officer that was he told us to be quiet, don't say anything. And then when those people got out, he had a key that he put into the elevator, and we went to an underground. We went deep underground, and we got out, and there was a train there, and I was put on the train, and they were very comfortable with children being around. And very, very damaged children. You know, we weren't mentally fit at that point. The program was very abusive. And I was on that train for about 2 hours, and I ended up in, we made a few stops, people got on and off, and I ended up in Montana somewhere. I believe I was picked up somewhere near Helena, Montana, by a woman, and she was basically my owner at that point, and I was taken to their residence near Seattle. I don't really want to discuss names or specific places. I don't want anybody living to have researchers unleashed on them. I'm not doing this. I'm not sharing this with you for revenge purposes. I'm just trying to add my experiences to the disclosure effort.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, I was there, and it was a big house, expensive place. They were wealthy, and I was witness to a few satanic ceremonies. He sacrificed a child and forced us to eat some of the child. And they did I found the stuff, I dug this stuff up later on the internet, and we did what's called the porcelain mask, where they put wax on you and hold you to the fire. And then he said that there were 3 of us that was at the house, myself, a young girl, and another boy. And he said that he was going to find us the optimal jobs for us to do. He was going to send us to places that were perfect fits for each of us.
In this segment, I asked Tony to relate more details of his trip to the moon and what happened there. He then resumes his story about being taken to Montana and Seattle and ritual abuse being continued on him before being taken to Peru to work as a psychic in a drug running operation.
So you're at this Air Force facility near China Lake, and there was a trip to the moon. So tell us about that.
Right after we had completed the programming, and he said that we passed for Theta or whatever it was. Late in the night, we were taken out onto the runway, and they had the staircase that rolled up to a plane, but it wasn't a plane. It was we went into it, and there were a lot of people that went on board. There were 100 people that went on board, and they had really wide seats. I remember it wasn't like an airplane. It was the same exact seats you would be in an airplane, but the rows were 10 or 15 seats wide. And we went into space, and when we got to, they announced places we were, like there's the base, the first one, and people on the right side of the craft could see it, I guess, and you could hear people talking about it. I couldn't see anything. And then we got up, and the wall, or windows appeared in the wall. It turned transparent, and we could see, and it looked like the Pentagon. It looked like on the moon, but the building was constructed like the Pentagon, and it was a trapezoid shape. And we landed there, and they took me off. I really those early memories are vague, you know. I don't think I was completely awake through all that. But I remember a few surgeries happening. There were processes, it was surgical processes that they did. Some of them were painful, some of them weren't. I remember one was like a gold needle that came, and it didn't hurt at all, and I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't painful, because they were hurting me, and then instead of me reacting or crying in pain or anything, they had some other way to just make you remain still. So we did that, and then I ended up right back at that base.
Well, before we go back to the base, let's know, what did you actually see on this trapezoid-shaped base on the moon? Did you see extraterrestrials? What do they look like? Did you see military people?
There were military people. I remember a tall military guy, blonde hair, talking to grays, taller grays, and I guess mid-sized grays, and they were in doctor's coats. The grays were, and he was in a full military uniform, and it seemed like he was giving them directions. They weren't telling him what to do. He was telling them what to do. I remember being wheeled down a long corridor on a gurney. It looked like a standard government building, like when you go to your local city hall. It's not the city hall, but like to go do your taxes or anything. The Social Security building in any town. It was concrete, and there were windows into the rooms, That some of them were blacked out, you couldn't see, and some of them you could see inside. It looked like a classroom. And but I was taken from there to surgical areas that looked like a hospital. Was a hospital room with, with equipment in there, and they were grays. They were gray aliens that did a few. And what they did, I don't know. I was never told, like, hey, we're going to take you in and take your tonsils out. That didn't happen. They were. It was very matter of fact. I was wheeled from one to another. I was given time to recover, a few hours or however long it took. I remember I'd wake up and feel better, and they would take me to another surgery.
Okay. Now, with these grey aliens, were they similar types of grey aliens to those that initially abducted you? And all this was happening in 1981 when you were about 9 years old, right?
Yeah, and I felt that they were a little taller. They were taller. Mm-hmm. There were many times that I was worked on throughout the entire experience that kind of blend together, but that time I was the youngest, so I mean it stands out in my mind. But I remember the ones on the base seemed to be taller than the ones that initially abducted me.
Right. Okay. And did you see any reptilians? You said that there were short reptilians that were part of the abduction.
Yeah, I believe the abduction took me to somewhere underground. I don't think I was on the moon base, and no, I didn't see any on the moon.
On the moon base, you just saw these taller greys and some military personnel.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you remember about that trapezoid-shaped base?
From the inside of it, not really. I kind of racked my brain for walking on and off of the ships throughout the whole service, because some of them had umbilicals and some of them just let us out right into the hangar. And I don't really remember getting off that ship, so I think I was drugged or what, I think I was sedated in some way when I was in and out of there.
Mm-hmm. And anything in terms of architecture, the style of the base inside that was distinctive that you recall?
Well, and I was a little bit. I remember I did have the thought to myself that this doesn't look alien. This looks like a human plate. This looks like something human, and I in my mind, like I said, I was still not putting anything together. I was just observing, but it didn't seem like the aliens had built it. It seemed like humans had built it, because it looked like any government building. It looked like a government building. When you would go to anywhere that you would go in a big city has a big building with long concrete halls and kind of like tile floors, shiny floor, glossy floors. It was like that. And I remember there were a few occasions where the lights didn't seem right, where they turned on the light and it was only in that area, and it didn't have ambient light that lit up the whole room. I remember there were a few stations like that. When they turned on the light was only in that area. There were some dark rooms like that.
Any signage? Did you notice anything about signs, markings on the floor? Any indications of the language that was used there?
Well, I couldn't quote one right now, but there were signs. There were plates on some of the rooms had a plate that said something about it, what that room was. But honestly, I was in no condition to pay attention to that. Okay. I was literally being wheeled on a gurney in like a hospital gown.
Okay. So after that, you then taken back to the base. So what happened next?
Oh, well, then I was taken, like I said, then through the train, and then to Seattle. I ended up driving from Helena, being driven from Helena, Montana to Seattle, and then I went through what I had mentioned earlier. I guess I was owned. It was my owner, and he was a practicing Satanist, and he did a few satanic rituals, and I was kept in a dog kennel down in the downstairs. They had it downstairs, and they had dog kennels for us that we were kept in. And then I was shipped on a plane, and I ended up in a place called Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru. I don't know if you want to put that out there or not, but I was dropped off of the plane. The plane landed there in an airfield, and I was picked up, and everybody spoke Spanish. There was one younger guy, maybe in his early 20s, that spoke English, and he was my handler. He was in charge of me because he spoke English, and he made it known that he hated the job. He didn't want to be in charge of me, and it was just because he spoke English, and he said if I gave him any trouble, the threat there was always that we're going to feed you the piranhas, if you mess up, don't try to run away. We'll catch you if you do piranhas. And they probably meant it, but after a while it turned into a joke, you know. And he took me there. He took me to the guy that ran everything in town. There was an office, like a office with papers stacked up, and he said the guy was talking in Spanish to him. He translated. He said that I cost a lot of money, and if I messed up, he was gonna. That was where the piranha joke came from. He said, if I messed up, I'm gonna feed you the piranhas. Now get on and don't cause any trouble. Mm-hmm. Maybe a week later, they put me in a little room. I had a black and white TV with maybe 2 or 3 channels, and it was in Spanish. I remember watching Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam in Spanish, and in black and white. And I just sat there. That was my life. And about once a month or every 3 weeks or so, they would take me on an airplane. It was a commando, like a cargo plane. And they said that they had lost one prior in the bad weather in Colombia, and that's why I was there, was to be like a intuitive, to do psychic service to see if the plane was going to crash, give them a heads up about it. I guess I did navigational stuff, I don't know. They would, before when the plane took off, they would lay me down on a cot. You know, it had the military, the folding cots. They would lay me down on that, give me a blanket. I remember I would always look out the window and watch us fly up over the rivers and the jungle. And we would fly. I would always ask him where we were. You know, the pilot on the way down came to me at one time and he said, "Do you know where you are?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You always have the right to ask where you are, son." And he explained that to me. And he said, "Never be afraid to ask anybody where you're at."
So essentially, then, you were identified during the abductions as having some intuitive, empathic skills, and that whoever was behind the program that was responsible for you assigned you to this operation in Peru because your skills would be somehow conducive for their operations.
Yes. Yep. All of this unbeknownst to me. You know, I remember having gone through it so I could put it together what I was doing, but during the time I had no idea what I was doing. When he put me in the cot after we got into closer to Colombia, he would put an IV in my arm and I would go unconscious. And I guess during that time that I don't know if they were channeling other people talking through me or if it was my subconscious or something, but he was able to ask me questions. He said he was able to speak to his dead mother. The first time they did it, nothing happened, and when we came back, they said it was just ramblings on. They said I rambled on. I was worthless. The first trip, they said you're going to end up with the piranhas, and everybody was mad at me, and they put me down. So then they contacted the people that sent me there, and they sent a silver meshed blanket down, and they said that it must be the EM from the airplane electronics that interfered. So the next time we did it, it was the same process. He put me on the cot, he gave me an IV, and then he wrapped me in a blanket with a silver blanket on top of it and another blanket. And I guess it worked because when I woke up, when I came to, and I always felt horrible for days afterwards, but when I came to, they were all astonished at the things I told them. Like I said, he said I let him speak to, it was his dead grandmother or something, and I predicted a lot of stuff that proved that I was worth my worth. And after a few months of that, people in the village, the children weren't allowed to be around me. Nobody would talk to me, but they all kind of looked at me, you know, in a different way. I was there for maybe 2 years, and I remember having the guy that took care of me. I grew close to him, and I had a lot of friendships there as I grew up. And I remember that I was mentally very unstable, that I would start crying for no reason, and I was very emotional. They called me the crazy boy from the moon. That was my nickname. They called me Los Loco Pequeño de la Luna. Right. That was what they called me. Okay. And at some point closer to puberty, it quit working. I lost the ability, and they shipped me back. And I remember the day that I left, we used to ride everywhere on big trucks. They'd load it full of all the kids from the village or people, and they took big trucks, like MASH, military-looking trucks, would go to town. That's how they went to town. Everybody carpooled together. That was the bus. But I remember that they took me to the runway on the last day, and they all lined up and they were waving at me, and I felt very welcomed there. And I remember for the rest of my 20-year service, I wanted to go back there. I always wanted to go back. I'd missed those people. I felt like I was family there.
Right. And so immediately after that, then you were taken to Seattle, where you had things happen to you there that you were part of. That was a very unpleasant phase in this program. You want to kind of summarize that for us?
Yeah, I'm going to write a book, and I'll go into detail about this. But basically, we went to Seattle. I was kept there with 7 or 8 other boys, and they would come and go. And we were sex slaves. They would throw big parties for fundraisers for political party fundraisers, and during the day there would be a few thousand people there. And then at night, we were told to be kept in our room, and then at night we would be chained together and taken out onto the lawn. And we were an exhibit, and anybody that wanted to could rape us. There were girls on a stage that were far away. I never saw it. I could see the lights. They had music. It was like a masquerade party with a few hundred people. And they had these every few weeks in the summer, so I did 2 summers of that. And they gave us drugs, and we did calisthenics every day. We were on a very tight diet. We were skinny, and we were always hungry. And every morning we got up and did like a military PT program out on the deck, and they gave us a cup full of pills to swallow. And I remember they changed the pills. After a couple years, they changed the pills, and I was allergic to one of them. And I'm allergic to codeine really badly. And after 3 days of that, I was just vomiting, and I couldn't even do the calisthenics. And the threat there was, instead of piranhas, when I was in Seattle, the threat was there is if you don't cut it here, if you can't behave here, you're going to go to the military, and you're probably going to be killed. That was the threat. His wife, I guess, lived there, and he was never there. He was always out and about. So when I couldn't take those pills, they said, you're going to end up in the military. And I asked, I said, can't we go back to the old pills we had? And she checked with whoever was in charge, and they couldn't. So she took me one night. I remember saying goodbye, and I remember being happy to leave that place. Frankly, I was bullied and raped there.
So let's just to be clear about the period. We're talking about the time from around from about the age 13 to around age 16 that you were in Seattle doing
so
doing this.
86-ish, yeah.
Right.
See, 81. So yeah, 84 to 86, 87, right in there.
Right. And so then after this period in Seattle, where the program made you do these things, subjected you to that kind of abuse, then you're taken again to the moon. And so what we'll do and pick up in the next episode is what happened on the moon. So before we go there, is there anything you want to say to kind of wrap up this segment, this episode?
Yeah, that because I was on Earth in Peru and because I was on Earth in Seattle, when I recalled these memories, I thought, man, that's crazy. This is crazy. But then I looked on Google Earth, and I was able to find both places. And I've never visited Seattle in my life, and I've never been to Peru in my life, this life. And but I have intimate knowledge. I know my way around. I found the house. I found the town in Peru. I found places that I was taken fishing, the river, the gold mine. They took us to the gold mine there to try to see if I could. The guy paid money for me to come down and see if they could put me under, and if I could tell him where gold was. And the guy, my handler, said not to tell him anything because the guy had enough money to buy me, and he kills kids. And so I think I told him. He told me later when I was asked where the gold is, I told him it was everywhere. And but that's all there. I was able to confirm all this. I was able to find all this on Google Earth, and I found places on the internet. So everything I remembered prior to knowing about it, I was able to find later. So that's, to me, the Earth service was my biggest pieces of evidence.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll come back next to hear you tell us about what happened when you were taken again to the moon.
Thanks,
Tony.
In the next episode, we will learn what happened to Tony when he was taken 7 years later in 1988, when he was 16, to the moon where he was trained for his first assignment for a secret space program with military and corporate facilities on Mars.